We need to stop comparing the strength development for a powerlifting program against a hybrid program. The goals are very different, and I think this has led to a lot of confusion when it comes to the interference effect. So if you want to know more, stick around because I'm about to explain. So here is the graph which demonstrates the comparison of strength development versus a strength-only program, a hybrid program, and an endurance-only program from the original seminal paper on the interference effect back in the 1980s by Professor Hickson. Here in this example you can see that the red line, the strength-only group, progressed to a certain rate. The hybrid group, the blue line, progresses at the same rate until around week 7. You get this plateau and then all of a sudden you get a decrease in strength. And Professor Hickson talked about how the inclusion of endurance training is what caused this interference with the development of strength, hence why strength development started to go down. Now, I would argue that there's a lot of issues with this paper. Not that it's a bad paper, it was the first ever paper, and there's a lot of videos that I want to make, all based out of questions that have come from this paper. However, you can't really compare the two programs because they are very, very different. If I was a powerlifter, I'm really focusing on strength and only strength in those key lifts. So my development over time is going to be very different because I am purely focusing on developing strength in those key lifts. Now, if I'm a hybrid athlete who's doing powerlifting and running, my development in strength is going to be very, very different. And it's not necessarily just because I'm adding in endurance training. It's because my goals are very different. I'm trying to develop strength at the same time as develop my endurance performance. That is very different than only developing your strength. You have a finite amount of time which you can train for both strength and endurance. So therefore, you're going to attribute less time to developing strength than you would if you're only training strength. This has a big impact and shows that the actual program itself is probably more important for how you develop strength in relation to if you've just added in endurance. Now, what we really should see is the dashed line. This dashed line has a gradient that's not as severe as the red line. That means the hybrid athletes are progressing strength at a slower rate, but they're increasing still. That's the most important bit. They're still increasing, they're just doing it at a slower rate because they're trying to develop two things at once instead of one. That doesn't mean that the hybrid program is less effective or it's a bad program. It's just taking into account that we need to develop slower because we're doing multiple things rather than just focusing on one. If I was a hybrid athlete, this is the strength development that I want to see, that dashed line. I want to see that I can continue developing strength over time, and it doesn't really matter if the rate of increase is as much as a strength-only program. The goals are very different, and we need to take that into account when we try and compare the two and use it as an example of the interference effect. Like this content, please subscribe to The Progress Theory, where you'll find out loads more regarding human performance.